After last week's election, the last place that I'd want to be seen on a day like this, Sunday, November 10th, 2024, is at a church, especially at one that claims to be evangelical. It would be one of the most sickening sights I'd ever experienced. I don't need to go into how they overwhelmingly voted last week. That was a foregone conclusion. Their piety and hypocrisy that would reek within those places would be enough, in my opinion, for Jesus to say that he'd spew them out. Yes, I'm implying that it would be that sickening. Now, the question is, are they capable of doing good, generous things in general? Yes. I can think of an example that was of personal benefit to me a little more than 10 years ago by a group of people that would be defined as evangelicals. But then I'm also a little more than 10 years removed from that group's generosity. I want to say, based on what I know about evangelicals and their voting tendencies, these people have long since been deceived. I'm going to go a little farther into some other things before I continue with the main thought. I admit that I've never been a participant or even a distant admirer of the Christian right movement, which gained political prominence back in the early 1980s with the Moral Majority and Jerry Falwell. I also recall other movements by the Christian Coalition and Promise Keepers back in the early 1990s. I was never a participant or an admirer of that. I've been a witness of church people holding literal prayer meetings about praying for federal judges to be appointed who reflected their interests and views. This occurred back at the turn of the 21st century, back between years 2000 and 2005. I also remember clashing with some of the faces of the so-called faith community representatives during the George W. Bush presidency. So that was between 2004 and 2008 when I had these clashes. These same people also had direct contact with George Bush. Now, that is not the focus of the message. I say that again. It is about how the elect has been so deceived that the very words that they use to declare certain groups of people and social behaviors as perversion, and that's really the key word, they themselves have in fact perverted God's word, twisting it to justify their agenda, which is steeped in racism, hate, sexism, xenophobia, and denying certain rights and freedoms. Yes, they love to talk about the sanctity of life. Every heartbeat should be afforded the right to live. But what about the mother? Does she matter? You love to talk about how the world has become Sodom and Gomorrah. You talk about the perverse behavior of the citizens who wanted action in on the angels despite Lot even offering his daughters to them. Well, here's something. Jesus, who offered that come all who are labored and are heavy laden, he would give them rest. A likely response by these people would be now, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and deal with it. Be accountable. Now, I've used this comment on a number of occasions this year. In fact, I used it a few times in previous years. I believe that Jesus would be branded and castigated as a liberal, a Marxist, and a socialist by today's church community, whose behavior based on my knowledge of the Bible would be akin to the Sadducees and Pharisees, whom Jesus called them to their faces fools, blind, brood of vipers, and they're just like their father, the devil. I'm going to give you two examples out of the Bible on how the actual stories they claim to embrace may show a side of Jesus that they would find hard to acknowledge. The first one is the woman who faced a kangaroo court by the elders. They set her up with a man and claimed to have caught her in the very act of adultery. They they brought her to Jesus, whom they expected would tell them that she should be stoned, because out of the mouth of two or three witnesses shall every word be established. But Jesus saw through their intent and perverse ways. And yes, I said perverse ways. He said, if anyone is without sin, let him cast the first stone. Eventually, it was just her and Jesus standing. Then he looked at her and said, go and sin no more. These are the same people who are likely to agree that there should never be any end to qualified immunity to police or for police, thereby negating any attempt at holding them accountable for their actions. They would embrace national legislation that would impose criminal penalties for anyone who resists stop and frisk, which, by some legal definitions, is a violation of the Fourth Amendment that talks about no illegal searches and seizures unless there was a reasonable, articulable suspicion. Now, along those lines, they've already looked in the other direction or simply ignored the implications of a 2024 Supreme Court decision that declared how the president has broad immunity when performing official acts of the office. These acts were never defined by that same Supreme Court, but their decision certainly has paved the way for a second Donald Trump term without any accountability on his part. These same people would embrace a time when kangaroo courts that consisted of all white juries, as opposed to a jury that's composed of a reflection of one's peers, that often acquitted white people who lynched and killed black people or jailed black people who were falsely accused of crimes they did not commit. Yeah, and these same people would show up in church on Sunday morning doing this, holding their hands up to the Lord, thanking him for the abundant blessings and everything. Yet they've done demonic, hateful things throughout the week. By today's conservative ideology, Jesus would be castigated as a liberal because in the Bible he offered equal employment and equal wages. Jesus was about fairness. He was arguably about civil rights. They may go as far as branding him as a socialist, which in its theory is a proponent of human equality and human welfare, even as far as a redistribution of wealth. But what we see from this same conservative ideology is grievance politics, racist politics, make things great again, right? But how? Now, according to the story, it said how someone came out and offered jobs to various people throughout the day. Some came early in the morning. They agreed to the wages that were offered. They came later in the morning and agreed to the wages that were offered. They came in the afternoon. The same boss offered the same job to a different group of people, and it offered them the same wages. He never refused those who came asking for an opportunity. He didn't ask whether they voted for him, nor did he ask whether they pledged their loyalty to him. All he did was because they showed up looking for an opportunity, they were afforded an opportunity to work and were paid the same wages as the people who accepted the same opportunities earlier in the day. Now, based on today's mindset, these people would argue because we were here, why should they get any opportunities? Send their asses back to where they come from. Why should they be paid the same as us? No, they don't deserve it. No, we've got to do something about that. But in that same passage, the reply to those people was, is your eye envious because I am generous? So those who are last in this world shall be first in this world to come, and those who are first, last. Now, how are these people been deceived? Well, it talks of false prophets and false Christs who will try to deceive the elect by performing great signs and wonders. What are some of those great signs and wonders? Well, I'll give you three among many. You'll have great health care. Comes to find out, you have only been offered concepts of a plan. And what were those concepts? We don't even know what the concepts are. I will be a protector of women. I am the father of in vitro fertilization, IVF. Did not this same person say that he was proud of and heeding to the Heritage Foundation and of the Federalist Society, among other influencers, and select three people to the Supreme Court who would vote and overturn Roe versus Wade? Did not this same person say that it was one of his proudest moments? And as a result of these decisions, many women have died into the hundreds, if not thousands already, because they were not afforded healthcare access because the doctors who could have helped them or treated them were concerned about being locked up and jailed. And then there's another one, just a trivial one. How about health? How about childcare and how it was addressed? Now, this may not be a true exact third example, but supposedly this person cares about childcare, right? But I don't recall him ever articulating anything about childcare. But he says, look, childcare is childcare. There's something that you have to have it. Great signs and wonders there. It's about 11:30 as I document this, and the 11 o'clock hour is known as and 11 o'clock hour is often known as the most segregated hour in America. There are people who are sitting in their church pews right now praising God for the election results and believing that this was truly God's will and plan. They voted for this lie. They've been deceived, not once, not twice, but now 3 times. The perversion in this argument is how their actions distort God's word. That is at its basic definition what perversion is. It is a distortion or corrupting of something. It is an alteration of its original meaning or course. And with that, that's all I have to share for this segment of the Gig Geezer. I'm in Wood Lane.